Well, hello. Welcome back to the Listen to This Bull live show. I'm Matt Mulholland,
I'm Remington Huggins.
and we are going to talk about hail and weather apps and algorithms and other crap that might have anything to do with an insurance claim and damage caused by those things. Well, damage wouldn't be caused by the algorithms, I suppose.
Hell no.
Hell no. Is that going to be our mantra for the whole
For
show?
the
I
whole
hope
thing.
not.
Yeah. When we hear something we don't like, it's just a hell
Oh,
no.
hell no.
It's not going to be. We
So-
have a special guest
Yes,
for
we do.
today.
I do. I'm really excited about this because
Pumped.
I've had a few interviews with Derik Kline of HailTrace before, and he is a very interesting man. He might be the most interesting person I've interviewed ever.
Most
Legitimately.
interesting hail man ever.
And it's
He's
kind of funny.
the weatherman.
The weatherman.
You should see him talk about weather. It's really,
Well, hopefully we will.
yeah,
So
I mean,
there's that.
obviously, I guess you will. I don't have to tell you about it. So he's waiting in the wings. There he is.
Hey,
Derek,
hey.
how are you?
Derek, what's
Amazing.
going on, man?
Not much, man. Just living the dream, you know.
Yeah.
Same old
Yeah,
same all about years.
We're doing good. We're more interested in what you're doing and what that thing is behind you. What is the Think Big deal?
I don't know, think big. I mean, we like to push the envelope, I guess, here at HailTrace. So, tell me that something's impossible, and I'll prove you wrong.
I like it.
It's impossible. What if I told you that 3/4 inch hail damaged roofs?
It wouldn't shock me. I mean, I'm not an engineer, so I'm not qualified to answer that
Good
question.
answer, Derek. He's just going to tell you that hail was there.
I knew he
It's not
was
his
gonna
job
say
to say what was damaged and what not.
I could have called. I would have made bets.
I am interested though in the idea of, I definitely don't think that there's a specific size of hail that it takes to damage stuff. And that's not I'm not an expert to make that opinion, but just, my eyes, they work. And so I've seen it do damage sometimes when it's bigger or smaller. And then I've seen, there's like a really like the storm that I got into HailTrace on, it happened May 16th, 2010. And it came through Oklahoma City and it had softball size hail, and that did lots of damage, like lots of damage. But the
Softballs are
northern
big.
edge of the storm had nickel size hail, which is 0.88 inch in diameter, and it dropped a lot of it, and it was very hard and very wind driven, and it totaled a lot of stuff just on like areas that were not in the severe size hail zone. So that's just like where my opinion comes, is that I've just seen where nickel size hail has done damage. Now I couldn't go through and be like, it was on this material and TPOs had it, but impact resistant shingles didn't. That's not where my expertise is, but I've just seen it before, and so I have an interest in it, which is kind of why we built the truck that we built.
Do you know who decided what objects they were going to compare the size of hail to?
I don't know. It's kind of funny though. Like when they're doing like warnings and they'll issue a watch, it's either pocket change or sporting ball size is what they said. But then they have hen egg lime size, which is, I mean, where does that come from? That's not a sporting ball or,
Sporting ball. I love
sporting
that.
ball. Yeah.
That's my favorite sport.
I think it just comes from layman terms talking about what they saw at that site when it comes to, comparing it to an object. I was in a deposition like a month ago, and the opposing counsel was like, well, how big was that water stain on your ceiling? Was it like the size of a pizza? And I was like, objection. How large? Is it a small pizza? Are we talking extra? Like, this is not relevant here. Seriously,
Objection.
We do
It's a
try to watch
pizza.
out for that. Like you'll see people say like marble size hail, and I'm like, was it a big marble or a little marble? Like they get pretty,
I
they
had
can
this
be
discussion last week with an insured who was saying it was like the size of blueberries. I was like, is that like a Maine blueberry or like a North Carolina blueberry?
My wife brought some grapes home the other day that were like, they were like that big. I've never seen grapes that big. So
Were they
yeah,
crunchy?
Crunchy. My kids
Grapes
destroyed
are
it
better.
before I even got to have one. So I don't know. Can grapes be crunchy?
Yeah, they got that little like pop, that they're like
Okay.
firm on the outside.
What?
whatever.
Firm on the outside, not on the inside.
Yeah,
Okay.
I love it.
that's how I test grapes. You
That's-
squeeze
So
Derek,
you like firm grapes.
it.
firm grapes it is.
You guys didn't see this, but she's over here going, you just squish them.
The hat always has good comments there. Derek, what's your official title at HailTrace? Is it owner? Is it CEO? Or what
CEO is what I usually put, but
okay.
kind of all the above, I guess. Founder, CEO, owner.
You ever thought about putting a different object into your scale? You know, it doesn't have to be golf ball or nickel. Maybe just do something arbitrary.
I feel like you have something that you're getting ready to suggest, so I'm just going to let you throw it out there.
Really coming up with some suggestions right now. Maybe, I mean, you could say anything.
That's terrifying.
I'm not going to go dirty automatically, necessarily.
I think I know what's on your mind here.
YouTube's going to flag this now, right?
Yeah, right.
Exactly. Dice size. You could go with any. I was just wondering, is maybe you have something that is particularly branded. Can you hit that button on the camera again? It looks like we got all kind of fuzzy somehow.
I can see Derek on the stand, and he's getting asked questions about how large the hail was, and he's like, "Have you listen to this bull? It's bull size.
It's bull
hail."
I mean, for me, when I was making that bull for when the storm, everything was a little bit bigger than it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I think.
So, I mean, when you report hail size, it's kind of like fishing. I mean, you know, I always say that, like, especially roofers, they're the worst. I mean, like, I mean, it's funny because, like, depending on where they're at, like Texas, they think, you know, hail size is big, but they always, you know, like a quarter, $50 size hail, that's typically going to be in the golf ball to 2-inch range for a roofer. So, you know, so if they're like, and then you like, send me a picture. So I always I'm like, send me a picture, and then they send them like, that's a quarter, maybe if they're lucky. But those golf ball size, you know, they get all excited. And then like in Chicago or Atlanta, we get this in Atlanta too. We had huge hail. This was awesome. It's like the biggest hail ever. And I'm like, oh, cool. Send me a picture. And then there's like a bunch of Dippin' Dots on the
Dippin' Dots. That would be a good
Welcome
one.
to Atlanta.
Dippin'
Yeah.
Dot size hail.
Yeah.
There you go.
What is up?
I do use Dippin' Dots. I like Dippin' Dot size hail, but that I feel like if we're talking about Dippin' Dot size hail in a deposition, we're probably not talking about that. That's one that I'm pretty confident in saying that Dippin' Dot size hail does not do damage.
Yeah.
I feel pretty comfortable with that.
Even if it's in Georgia, I agree with you on that.
I think that there's whoa. Look at
I like how this is
really
going.
cool.
I need some.
Oh, it looked really cool for a second.
It really did.
Derek, what got you into the hail game? What started this?
Well, so it literally was that storm that I just talked about, May 16th, 2010. I still remember. So at the time I was selling alarm systems for my best friend. He owned a company called Edmond Security here in Edmond, where I live. And so it was either a Saturday or Sunday afternoon. I can't remember what day, but I remember I was mowing the yard. So I was, and this storm had gone up, and I was watching it come across. And so I was a storm chaser. So I chased tornadoes, and so I just loved it. I loved the weather. And so I'm watching this storm come across, and I'm trying to decide if I want to go chase this storm. But I'm like, it's not going to produce a tornado. So I wasn't interested in it. So I was just watching it, you know, just for the fun of watching coverage. And this thing comes across, goes all the way across the entire city, dropping softball size hail. I mean, just obliterating for like 20 minutes. I mean, obliterated everything that it hit. And so it's probably $1 billion loss. But at the time, like there wasn't a business opportunity for me on that. Like, I didn't understand storms yet and what they meant, what they did damage wise. Again, for me, they were just a hobby.
Right.
And
you still got
so,
excited about it at that point, though, right?
What's that?
You still got excited about it at that point, though, right?
Oh, I definitely did. Yeah,
I've never seen anybody get as excited about hail as you do. It's almost unnatural how happy you get when you start talking about hail.
Well, the funny thing is it's not for the same reason that you guys get excited for hail. Like, I legitimately just love storms. So, like, So like I just get excited for the storm itself, not for the money that's coming for, I mean, whoever it is. I always say storms make money for both sides. So you're foolish if you don't think farmers makes money. Like if hailstorms and tornadoes stop, then people wouldn't need insurance. So, I always say both sides want hailstorms to happen. I mean, obviously farmers wants them to be a little less damaging potentially, but they still want them to happen. But it's funny because like that storm came through and, I was super excited. And the next day, a friend of mine had gone to work for a roofing contractor and they were like, "Hey, could you make me a map that shows me where that storm went?" And I was like, "For what?" And they were like, "Well, I'm selling roofs." And I was like, "Okay, but what do you want the map for?" And they were like, "Well, because it shows me where the damage was." And I was like, "Okay, so you need to know, like, you want to know like where the bigger hail was?" And they were like, yeah. So like I drew out this map that had 3 different colors on it. I was like, here's kind of this about where it went. And I knew because I'd chased storms, I'd gotten in hail on accident before. And you go, what'd I do wrong on that one? And so you go look at it on radar and you kind of learn where the biggest hail is in the storm. Like, don't want to get in it. So I put it together and they were like, "Yeah, this is actually really good." And I think I got $100 for that, but
$100.
yeah, $100, right?
That's
So
good.
I was like, maybe I could make this a business. And so I literally spent like the next year and a half tracking a few storms here and there and like researching radar software and technology and learning how to build a website and and then
Did you build the website yourself then too?
the very first one I built myself. Yeah.
Wow.
It was horrible. In fact, I posted a picture on LinkedIn the other day. You can go see it. It was pretty
Crap
bad.
that I'm picturing in my head can't be real. I'm picturing a really bad website.
It was really bad. It was really bad. I didn't know what I was. It was built in Joomla. So if you don't know anything about websites, Joomla is basically like Microsoft Word for the internet. So that was basically what I built it in.
What's wrong with Word?
I mean, it's great for writing a paper.
Not so
So
great
what
for a
started-
website, I guess.
What started your love for weather?
Ooh, that's a great question. So you actually have to go all the way back to when I was 5 or 6 years old. I can't remember I almost remember it to the day. There were 2 weather events that I got really excited about when they occurred, and I've been super like I'll go through some of my history, but so one of them was a storm popped up on my house, like it kind of went up right on top of it. And we just had like you probably had them before, like where you kind of get a few big raindrops, you hear like some really loud thunder, but the storm, it's forming on you. So it doesn't really do a whole lot. But my grandparents, which is in Sand Springs, Oklahoma, lived about 2 miles from me, my great grandparents actually. And they had golf ball size hail and it blew their tree over. And like funnel clouds, like the whole bit. So like within a 2-mile stretch, this went from nothing to, golf ball size hail or really big hail. And I was just blown away that like there was that much power. It was astonishing to me. As a little kid, I just thought it was so cool. And probably the thunder, I think that was probably, I loved the thunder. And so there was that. And then there was actually a winter storm that same year where we got like a foot of snow in Tulsa, which is kind of a big deal. It'd be like, Atlanta getting 2 inches of snow.
And everything's shutting down.
You're right. So, or Denver getting 48 inches of snow. They're the same equivalent. So it was a big deal. But since then, like I watched the Weather Channel nonstop. I did not watch cartoons growing up. I literally watched the Weather Channel for hours on hours throughout the day. That you can go find like papers, it's like, what's your favorite TV show to watch like in 2nd grade, and you have to write, and mine was the news. Like I have it. It's written out, the news. That was my favorite because I wanted to watch
Your
the
parents
weather.
probably had a few parent-teacher conferences that were a little bit weird.
Right. Why does he like watching the news so much?
Did you watch the movie Twister a lot?
I did. So that came out. I was, how old was I? I was 13 when that came out, which I already wanted to be a storm chaser. Oklahoma had storm chasers then. It was a pretty big. If you've never been to Oklahoma during severe weather coverage, you have to come out here when we have like a tornado outbreak day. It's like people like there's obviously two spectrums. You have people that are just deathly terrified of storms, and it's not fun for them because we do get some pretty nasty weather. But there's the other side of the spectrum where it's like beer and pizza, and I'm going to turn on the news, and we're going to watch severe weather coverage tonight because it's like they're all in. I mean, it's like helicopters flying around the storms. I'm a storm chaser for one of the TV stations, so like we're out streaming live video of the tornadoes and the hail, and it's cut-ins, and I mean it's they call it wall-to-wall coverage. They'll basically kick on at the 5 o'clock news, and it won't go off until 11 p.m. that night, like just straight up weather coverage. And they'll tell you that more people watch that than the Super Bowl.
I believe it.
Wow.
That's kind of how it is in Florida with hurricane season. Like I'm from Florida, and hurricane season, we had hurricane parties. We just sit out on the front porch and watch it roll in.
I learned that in Irma. So I drove down to Florida. I was in Punta Gorda in Irma. I drove down to be in it. And so I'm at this hotel, and there's like 10 couples there that lived in, they went there to, instead of leaving, they just went there, and they were hammered. I was it's like, we're about to get hit with a Cat 5 hurricane, and y'all are just hammered. I mean, they were having a good time.
I used to go out in the when I lived in the Daytona, I was going to Riddle. We would go out in the water with a boogie board, or my skim board that I use as a boogie board. The day that the hurricane was coming in, before it came, obviously, but the swells were huge, and so was the undertow. So it was dangerous as hell. But man, it was so much fun.
The waves
my
are
wife probably
crazy.
would never let me do that again. But she's watching this episode right now with a giant smile on her face because she is herself. There she is. She's a weather nerd, and she is she's totally sold on you. Have you ever heard of Mike's weather page?
Yeah, he's got a great page. So what's really cool about his page is it links so many different weather resources that you just go to his, like I have his page saved, so I can just go there and click to the different resources. So like that's one of my favorite pages for tropical stuff. I love Tropical Tidbits, which he has linked all over his page, but I love going in there and kind of diving into the models and doing some of that stuff there. So those are he's a great.
She's been digging into that so much in the last few weeks.
Does she have a drunk donkey T-shirt?
Yeah, well, I haven't gotten her one yet, but she showed me the clip where the newscaster called him a drunk donkey.
That's great. Sometimes the newscast, I don't get it. They get so butthurt over somebody that's not a meteorologist.
Yeah,
I mean, they're like, which I'm actually not. Like it, it was a hobby for me, and I just, I mean, I know a lot. I'm pretty good at what I do, but
you have meteorologists on staff, though, right?
I do. Yeah, I have 6 of them. So yeah, so we definitely. But it's great. Like I don't get why they get so mad about some guy like giving an opinion. Like if people don't, if he's horrible at his opinion, people aren't going to watch. But they just see it as like taking views away from their TV station.
Yeah. Well, better answer her question. What's the difference in wind-driven hail versus non-wind-driven hail? How does that change the impact velocity? Do you happen to know the answer to this?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely. I mean, I couldn't tell you the engineering side of the impact velocity off the top of my head, but it definitely speeds it up. So you can have an updraft that can actually be sucking the air up underneath a storm, so that hail can be falling through air rising, which is would actually slow the hail speed down, right? Mm-hmm. So that's a possibility. I've actually been under hail that was like golf ball in size, and I could almost reach out and grab it. Like it was almost felt like it was almost like snowflakes falling. It was really cool.
That's really cool.
But then I've seen it. Yeah. Oh, it was really cool. Like the sun was out on the back side of the storm too. So it was like illuminating them really white. It was really, really, they almost like were glowing. They were so bright.
I would think the world's about to end.
That would be so surreal.
Chicken Little. Yeah. The sky is falling.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Did you get any video? Does anybody have video? I gotta find video of that. That is.
I don't know if I have any. I mean, I think I was so excited. I don't think I remember to get my phone out and shoot video, but I'll get some video of that because I'll see it
Was
again.
your
I'll probably
ship
see it this year.
billowing upward and stuff? Do you
No,
remember?
no, no. I mean, you couldn't like feel the air rising up. It was more like because right at the ground, like it's pulling it from the ground, it's picking up in speed as it goes up. So. But it's the same concept of a tornado. That's usually where the tornado forms at, is in that area where there's upward motion.
Wow.
So if you actually watch a tornado video, they are pulling the air in and also lifting it at the same time. So the clouds are always going up and around. So they're kind of like that. So that's the updraft. That's actually the most intense part of it, is in that location. So
that is so cool.
that's why tornadoes do more damage, like an F2 tornado, so winds like in the 120 range or something like that, and then you have a hurricane that's 120. The hurricane will be costlier, right? It'll do $1 billion in damage, but the F2 tornado, whatever it hits, it will destroy way worse than the 120 in a hurricane will. So there's it's a smaller impact zone, but it's a worse impact on a tornado. But that's because the violent twist in the air, and then also the uplift. So it's like a hurricane. I can drive in 120 mile per hour winds, and it's not going to flip my vehicle. But a 120 mile per hour tornado will pick up my truck and throw it. So big difference. But the difference is it's pulling up on my truck, whereas a hurricane is pushing down on it. So it's actually, hurricane allows my tires to work better. So I better downforce it.
Speaking of hurricane, we have a question in regards to hurricane. Please explain the hurricane pressure that sucks water down drains and toilets.
Well, that's interesting. I would assume it's a high pressure cell that's pushing it down.
Well, I mean, so I haven't heard of a hurricane drain. I've heard of tornadoes sucking the water out of toilets. I have seen that, or sucking like insulation out of attics. Like it'll just like get the soffit loose, and then it'll suck it out from underneath because a tornado is sucking everything in. I mean, hurricanes are doing that. They're just on a bigger scale. There is some pretty impressive pressure in hurricanes. Yes, so Category 5 Michael. I mean, I was in the eye of Category 5 Hurricane Michael. I can actually show you video from inside of the eye, well, close to the eye. I was like right on the edge of it.
So cool.
So that was pretty intense. I'd have to look more into the pressure actually draining a toilet, but they do have pressure. That's why you see water gets pushed out ahead of them. It actually creates like a swell. It's not actually a push. It's actually like a swell that happens on the ocean. That's what storm surge is. And it's definitely higher right near the center, especially the northwest quadrant.
Would that be because the center has low pressure or something? It's kind of pulling it in.
I mean, the center is low pressure. It's really low pressure. So typically in weather, we'll look at pressure in millibars as the reading that we like to use. So like a really, really strong low pressure like storm system in the plains, like when we have a severe weather day or a big snowstorm, is like 990 millibars. Hurricane Michael, I want to say, if I remember right, was 919. So like significantly, and the spread, so like a really strong high pressure. So the opposite is like 1040 or 1050. So it's only like a 50 millibar difference from really high to like really low pressure. In our regular storm systems that happen. Well, Hurricane Michael was an additional 80 millibars lower than your normal low pressure or your strong low pressure out in the plains. So that's how strong that was. That was like your ears pop and stuff like that when you get towards the center of them. Like you can feel the pressure difference in the center of it.
Answer the guy's question. So toilets work by the water coming from the basin and pushing down, and it's the weight of the water that pushes it over the level of the trap. So the trap goes back up and over. As the weight of the water pushes down here, it goes up over the trap and it sucks it down. If there's a lot of pressure here pushing down, it's going to push more water out over the trap. That's probably what happened. Really high pressure. That's what
that would make sense. Toilets. Since I don't know how toilets work, that would make sense though.
Yeah.
Kind of like if you have those weather barometers. Have you guys ever seen those with like the colored liquid in the barometer?
Oh yeah.
And you got the big glass, and then you got the little stem that comes up, and when the pressure's lower, it pushes water up the stem. Basically, same toilet's probably the same. Thinking about it, works basically the same way.
I mean, toilets are just barometers, basically.
They really are. I'm gonna start I'm gonna get like a
Barometers.
Sharpie, and I'm gonna mark my regular toilet level so that way I can. Oh, look at there, we got low pressure
That
today.
would be really cool. I think we should
Just
do
being
that.
honest though,
I
why
love
does
that idea.
everything that you do come back to shit or
I think about shit a
a
lot.
bathroom of some sort?
It's true.
Listen to
it's
this bull.
strange.
Yeah.
You know, you got to tie it in. You got to do
It's
what
a
you got
bit
to do.
strange. I think you should see somebody about that.
It is amazing.
There are
It
proctologists.
is.
I've said it before. I said it at the American Summit, the Contractor Summit. You should have been an engineer, man. But you would have been too bored. So actually scratch that, you know?
I like arguing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there you go.
So from I know you're not a meteorologist, but from a meteorologist's perspective, that was hard to say fast.
It was.
Somebody
It's a mouthful of letters.
It was.
Sometimes I have to think
From
about
a meteorologist's perspective, is there any bullshit that you hear insurance carriers or other hail sourcing weather data that you've seen out there that you just want to call out?
I mean, a lot of times you just see people say stuff as a weather expert. So like the biggest thing, we'll see a report and it'll make an assumption about the storm. So one of the things that we've seen, and I get contractors that do this too. This is not a industry specific side of things for this to happen. How come they'll say like, how come HailTrace doesn't say the direction the storm is moving? And I know what they're wanting, and so I'll say, well, why would you like to know what direction the storm is moving? Because that'll tell me the wind direction. Well, no, the wind doesn't blow in the direction the storm. Sometimes it does, a decent amount it does, but they don't go hand in hand. Most of the time when we're talking about big hail, we're talking about supercells, which is literally a low pressure, a micro scale low pressure in the atmosphere. So depending on the air is flowing to that center of the low pressure, which is the mesocyclone of that storm, which is on the southwest quadrant. So the storm can be moving east and it can have a wind out of the northeast. So moving the opposite direction that the storm is moving. That happens plenty, a lot of times actually. So like that's something that we see. I think, we see like, for example, like if you're doing like something that is, if we've gotten to the point where we need court ready stuff, we're going to argue this to the death on date of loss, let's say. I'm all for, right? Like that makes perfect sense to me. If we're, if you've got a $10,000 claim, and let's be real, like on both sides of the fence, that's not a big claim. So like, I get it, a little algorithm report, you pump that thing out. Yeah. It says it hailed, boom, done, move on. Right. But if we're talking about $1 million roof, if I was an insurance company, I would want to confirm that we were working in the constraints of that policy. That is a contract, whether you like the contract or not, it's there, it's signed. We have to work within it. Like that's what it is. And if that policy says we need hail, now there's different arguments on that, but if that policy says we need a date of loss within the last 2 years and they want to call the contractor's bluff, I say call the contractor's bluff. I get it. I would do the same thing. It's $1 million roof. That's a lot of money. And that pricing on that policy is based upon the idea that, we're only going to pay over a 2-year period or something, right? Like if they were going to pay a 10-year period, they would probably charge more for that policy. Like I get it. They're for profit. It doesn't, they're not hiding anything, at least from that standpoint. But so at the end of the day, an algorithmic report is not based off of an address specific location. So it is an algorithm that is designed to get a broad scope of a storm and kind of guide that along. And most of the algorithm reports that you see will have that in a disclaimer. They'll say, you know what, this use it for what it is. It can be helpful, but it's not. I wouldn't take it all the way to court, and you definitely wouldn't get a meteorologist to just look at it. If they would, I mean, when we do expert reports, we do love when they mention the algorithm because it's so easy to destroy that.
They do that on
But
almost every engineer report around here. I mean, they go straight to an algorithm report.
yeah, well, and so and that's a whole different ballgame too. Engineers are not meteorologists for the first thing. So
You say that one more time, really loudly.
engineers are not meteorologists.
You get angry.
Yeah, I like the huge thing that I like to say. There's 3 pillars to a claim, and so you could do the 3 circles, right? Like with a diagram. Is that
Venn
what that
diagram kind of deal?
Venn diagram, right? Okay, so
I'll be
most of the
one
time, like when you talk about a Venn diagram, yeah, you need to make your circle too.
You're
I
not
don't know how I can get. We need to line out. This isn't going to work.
Attorneys are
But
mean.
but if you take those 3 circles, right? So the 3 circles are going to be weather. I put weather on top because that's the most important to me. And then the next one is going to be engineering, and then the next one is going to be policy. Okay. And engineering could also be contracting, right? Like that's the building side of the policy.
Sure.
So what is it going to take to bring it back to whole? And then what does the policy say we're allowed to do to bring it back to whole? And then was there a weather event that caused and this is obviously a weather-based claim. So you have those 3. So what's interesting is in a Venn diagram, typically when you overlap, you get 2, that's supposed to be better. But in this case, it's not. So when the engineer tries to overlap into the weather side of things, they're doing something that they're not supposed to do. Your job was to get up there. Like for example, you asked me earlier, did this size of hail do damage? I don't know. It's not my job to tell you if it did damage. It's my job to tell you what size of hail fell. It's the engineer's side to get up on the roof and tell you if there's damage or not, and if the evidence points to that size of hail doing damage. That's the engineer's job. And then just like as a PA or I'm going to leave attorneys out because they're coming back here in just a second. As a PA, that's your job to interpret that policy, or as an IA, that's your job to interpret that policy to say this is what it's supposed to do. Now, in a Venn diagram, we need to tie all 3 of those together, and that's what attorneys are for. Attorneys can facilitate the 3 of those and make all 3 of those work together. So when all 3 of those come together, that's your attorney in the center.
100%.
100%.
I do.
We're gonna have to post a picture in the
little bit of
comments or something for the visual learners out there. But
I mean, the 2 arguments that we face in every case.
He wouldn't do a visual aid.
There it is. Oh, look at that.
One more right here going. In every single case, one of the biggest, there's two biggest that I always have to face, 2 issues. Number 1, data loss. Make sure that this loss occurred during this policy period. That's where HailTrace, Derik come involved. Hire the meteorologist to say, yes, on 4/20 that this data loss occurred. And then secondly, causation. Well, did this weather event cause the damage to this roof surface on this date? That's where the engineers come involved. And then, like you said, Derik, you get the policy language, you tie that in to the causation plus the data loss, and there's coverage. So this is arguments that I make literally every single day, probably every hour. Like I'm thinking about those 3 concepts, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Every hour?
Yeah.
Every hour, seriously.
But but you see them overlap all the time. I see PAs trying to be a meteorologist on a claim, or I see them trying to be engineers on a claim. Like, and I've seen meteorologists try to give engineering opinions. Like, I'm not saying that, it goes in all directions. It's just, sometimes it's tough for us to stay in our own lane and understand, what it is that we were hired to do. But, at the end of the day, like if you hire HailTrace, it starts out with 2 steps. The first one is, we're just going to confirm that an event has happened. And then once we confirm that, then we're going to put together a report that is going to build an argument around being able to prove that event has happened. And that's what takes it doesn't take a long time to figure out if an event has happened, but it does take a long time to build an argument towards it happening. And so, you put all that together and voila, you get 36 pages of explanation of how it held for 5 minutes at an address.
So when you're doing site specific, you were talking about algorithm being not so accurate.
Sure.
Site specific, you have a meteorologist generally looking at the data and coming up with an opinion, but I mean, those opinions are based off of the algorithms most of the time, aren't they? Isn't
For
it
who?
still an algorithm?
I mean, a lot of times for like, again, if you're trying to look at, I think there's two different levels to what most companies do. If they, so, and so I feel like you have to be careful too, because there's the level of confirming, did something happen?
Mhm.
And I don't need a big report to do that. Like we get hired all the time to, spend 20 minutes and, maybe Remington, like in your case, it would be, hey, Derek, can you tell me if I should take this case or not? I need a data loss within the last 2 years. And so I'm gonna look at that and go, did a storm happen within the last 2 years? And I'm gonna come back and be like, no, it didn't happen. And Remington can be like, no, I don't want the case. Or I can say, yes, it did happen. And you can say, okay, I do want the case. And then you go, all right, Derek, now I need an expert level report. So there's two ways to do that, though. You can hire me to tell you, should you take the case, which I'm going to have my meteorologist spend 20 minutes. We're going to pull up all the different date possibilities. I say 20 minutes. If it's in Dallas, it takes a lot longer than if it's in Atlanta, because there's a lot more opportunity in Dallas than there is in Atlanta. But so we're going to review that and tell you yes or no based off of what a meteorologist said. But if you pull it off of an algorithm, it may have different, like the algorithm might be off by a mile. And so it might say, yes, there was a storm. So I might tell you, Remington, yeah, go ahead and take the case. But then when I have my meteorologist start to build the case, he might go, you know what, that algorithm was tilted wrong. And that address actually wasn't impacted by that storm. And now all of a sudden you've taken a case where you don't have a data loss, where I say, I can't send my meteorologist in to fight this for you because I don't have the proof to back it up. And so, and a meteorologist, if they don't understand that, if they do think the algorithm is correct, if they don't understand that side of it, that's just inexperience, though. That's not you're just not an expert at that level, in my opinion. So, but that's literally what it boils down to, is a lot of times people are using them to form that opinion based off of an algorithm. And then, can you fight it from there? And that's the scary part, in my opinion.
Let's talk about data loss. As an attorney, you're looking for a date of loss, like Derik is saying, as a possibility within the statute of limitations period or within the suit limitation period, whatever it is you're looking for within that period of time on a policy. Does it matter if the policyholder has the date of loss correct when they file the claim or not?
I think it certainly helps. It certainly helps.
Helps, but is it necessary?
I would say it would be policy language specific on that, but I've had cases where a public adjuster, or contractors had it, a public adjuster has it, and then I am a month out from the 2 years from that date of loss, and I've changed it before I filed that complaint or the lawsuit and said, we think the date of loss is actually April 6th rather than April the 20th. I've changed it. I haven't lost the case because I've changed the date of loss. And I think there's some reasonable explanations behind, hey, this is why I put this date of loss here, especially for a policyholder, because, they're basing their date of loss typically off of somebody that's helping them with the claim, whether it be the contractor or, a public adjuster or even an attorney. And they're like, hey, I think this is the best date of loss. And they just file the claim with that. It always helps to have the accurate date of loss from the get-go. However, to answer your question, I don't think it's devastating to switch that date of loss down the road.
This is something that comes up from time to time with our claims, Derik, and I think it's important to jump on while that conversation was open. But the policies, for the most part, in the condition section say that you have to file for damages. You don't have to file for a specific date of loss. When you submit a proof of loss, it says that you have to submit a proof of loss that includes the date that the damage occurred, possibly the time the damage occurred. I think when you submit the proof of loss, if you're going to do that, then you have already collected all your evidence that supports that date of loss. But prior to that moment, I think it's okay for someone to give their best guess, if that's what it is, or just to do a date of discovery up to that point.
Yeah. And I agree with you on, because it's a sworn proof of loss under oath that
And you're providing all the evidence for it at that moment with that proof of loss attached to the same proof of loss.
This hail event happened on this date, and these are the damages that stemmed from that hail event on this date. So it's a sworn.
If the carrier is going to use one of those algorithms, or their carrier's expert engineer is going to use an algorithmic report for that area, and they determine that the date of loss would actually have been this date, and then the carrier says, well, you should file a new claim for this. That's just bullshit. You were supposed to just file the claim on the damages. The damages are the same. It's the same damages. They can just change the date of loss in their system. Don't let them force you to file a new claim. That's crap. That's crap.
Yeah, just modify the date of loss. It's that simple.
Now, if the data
you just have to make sure that you have a modification that you can apply for, though, right? That's the dangerous side. Is there's golf ball size hail damage at the property, and I preface that to say, like, the damage just points to it was pretty large hail, right? Like maybe the spatter marks are really big or something like that. Again, not an engineer, but we need to say that there was big hail, right? And so we give this data loss, and then no, that didn't happen. Well, now I go back and I look and I don't have another data loss. Well, now we have an issue, right? So that's kind of where, where you could run into a problem, or it could even be around the evidence, right? Like, had a wind claim that we're filing this data loss because the roof started leaking on this date. And then we go look and we go, well, there wasn't even a storm on that date. And it turns out that the roof's actually been leaking for 2 years, and, we're just trying to get a different, so like, you don't want the weather data to pin you into a lie. And it can, if you're not giving. So you just have to be careful with that. You want to make sure that you are, be honest with what you're doing, obviously.
And if you get weather data from Derik on a site specific, and it turns out that the most recent storm, according to his meteorologists, show you that the storm occurred prior to the suit limitation period, do you think you're obliged to submit that information to the carrier, or let it ride unless they say something about it?
You said it's before there's a lawsuit filed?
Before the suit limitation period. Well, before you file the lawsuit, but also if you find out the data loss that the storm damage actually occurred on was past that suit limitation period. If it's 2 years and you find out that the data loss from Derik's meteorologist on a site-specific deal is 2.5 years old, but you filed a claim on a date of discovery because you didn't know any better, but then you find out that it's beyond that point, do you think that the policyholder should provide that information immediately, or is it okay for them to not say anything?
It's going to come out sooner or later, especially if they go legal. And I'll piggyback off what Derik said. Just be honest. I mean, because at the end of the day, it's going to come out. And if they're filing a lawsuit on a data loss past that suit limitations period, insurance carriers, attorneys, they're smart people. I mean, that's why they're in their position. They're pros at what they do. They're going to figure it out. So I would piggyback off of what Derik said and just be honest and go from there. But, I feel like, being the attorney answer, like there's different facts that could fall in there. Well, we noticed the leak a year and a half later, things like that I think play. So,
I mean, technically they still owe for the damage, even if it's beyond the suit limitation period. It would just change whether or not a suit could be filed.
Yeah.
They still owe for the damages. Anyway, that's a policy issue.
For sure. Hey, Derik, do you have any tips when it comes to, hail or these storms to contractors, public adjusters, or even attorneys out there?
Yeah, as far as like working the storms and that type of stuff. I mean, I think the first thing is just understand how they work. And there are different types of storms, but understand like what your goal is as a contractor. So your goal is, if you're a storm guy, your goal is to find damage. So I hate when I hear contractors say, I can't wait for a storm to happen. And that's literally what they are waiting for, is consistently waiting on a storm to happen. Right? Like Matthew, I see you guys all the time working storms in Georgia, an area that has very few storms compared to other areas, but you guys are finding, and I think the key is you're not finding new storms always, you're finding damage. There's obviously a statute that we have to work into with how far back we can go, but you guys are looking for damage. And so I think if you can transition your mindset as a contractor to, my job is obviously, if I get a new storm, if I get a College Station or in Austin, Texas, I know that there's a lot of damage, and it's pretty much every rooftop that I go to is going to have damage. So I get it. That's low hanging fruit. Go eat and have fun. Like, that makes perfect sense. But the idea of being a roofing contractor in Denver, Colorado, and telling me that I got to start doing remodeling work because I don't have a storm doesn't make sense to me. You guys have had storms that have provided quarter-size hail that have contributed to additional damage at properties, but you've had a lot of storms in that area. And so the combination of those storms does equal damage. It's just not low-hanging fruit. Go out and look for the damage.
Yeah. I tell you what, if contractors or public adjusters want to come out to Georgia and spend a year working claims here, I think that you'll find that the state you came from was wonderful. The grass is not greener on this side. But you can cut your teeth on some very difficult claims and learn how to do some things that you normally wouldn't have to do. True or false?
Very true.
Very true.
100%. I'm licensed in different states, and I started in Georgia. It's my hometown. This is where I live. It's tough. Anybody who tells you different, they just really haven't rolled up the sleeves and dove into everything here in Georgia, because it's tough. It is. There's no doubt.
You definitely have to look into the details of everything a little bit deeper. And finding the damage isn't hard. I mean, there's carriers right now that are just refusing to pay for anything, just the hell of it, because if they put that gate up, only a certain number of people will actually walk through that gate and keep going. And that's really a shame. But in states that have low leverage, like Georgia, because the lack of fee shift appraisal, all that fun stuff that most states get to enjoy, it's difficult, and you definitely have to have all of that information ready for you. I think programs like HailTrace are absolutely vital in states where there's low leverage, because you need more documentation on everything. If you don't have better documentation than the carrier does, you're not going to win the claim, and that's just the reality.
And I like to look at documentation. I mean, whether it's storm documentation or having a good estimate put together, or photos, right? Like your company cam type stuff, like all that type of stuff. Like, why would you not have good documentation, no matter what your state's policies are? To me, it just makes sense to come prepared when you're going to talk to someone. If you want to look like a professional at what you do, then prepare good documentation and show up with a presentation that says, I know what I'm doing. And I think
what happens when you mix Yingling and Guinness? All head. It's messed up. I can't drink that. All of that's going to be in here. I'm just going to be covered in white stuff. It's going to look really wrong.
This tornado pressure is bringing it down.
It really is.
That's unfortunate pour right there.
I can't drink that.
I like what you're saying though, Derik, when it comes to documentation. I mean, that, like you said, if you're a professional, be a professional. Have your stuff, your T's crossed, your I's dotted, be ready to rock and roll.
For everything.
And if you're working insurance claims, like it's a little bit different than just doing a retail deal. And I see people all the time say that retail has more money, and then I see people say that storm has more money. I don't know. I've never done both, so I'm not an expert at either one. But I do know that there is money in the insurance side, and so to say, like, to not come prepared to the table, whether it's for your homeowner, for the policyholder, right, whoever it is that you're talking with, but then also to the insurance company, right? Like, they're the ones stroking the check at the end of the day. Like, come prepared to to talk to them and show them what you need to bring that home back to restoration. And, I feel like, you're helping the insurance company make an argument for why they need to pay for that claim as well. So, I would almost bet, Remington and Matthew, that you guys have gotten claims to handle, and you probably shouldn't have gotten them. That if the contractor would have been more professional
Daily.
and had their I's dotted, their T's crossed, that it would have never even came to you, that the insurance company would have been like, oh, well, this is a no-brainer. Yeah, we should definitely pay this. But
Well, I don't know how many of those exist in Georgia, actually, where the carrier says that, and not anymore. Maybe 4 years ago, definitely 10 years ago.
I've had both, though, where maybe the person in front of me or the company in front of me, like it shouldn't have gotten to my hands because maybe they fumbled the claim before it got to me, or number two, they didn't do their homework and noticed that there wasn't a storm involved, and then I'm there scratching my head saying, "Uh-oh, we're in a bad position at this point." So
yeah, and I'm not faulting anybody for that either, because I would say, 5, 6, 7 years ago, HailTrace was not. You should not hire me to be an expert on a weather claim. Now I could analyze radar and understand it, but I couldn't put a document together that you could use for a legal purpose. Like, I didn't understand that side of it, but I learned it, and now I'm in a position where I can understand it and be a resource for that. And so I think that's just something, as a contractor, even as a PA, or whatever it is, just understand like where you're at and know that you have room to grow. There's space for you to get better at what you do. And constantly try to find, and there's lots of resources out there. There are tons of places to get stuff for free, even. And so, utilize that stuff, because it's,
There's a PA I talk to regularly, Jennifer Campbell, and she's newer, but she's fantastic, and she's curious, and she asks the right questions. But there was something that she realized not that long ago, and I'm going to quote her on this, but she realized that everybody is still learning. Everybody at every level. We all still mess up. We're going to mess up again. I'm going to screw up a claim. I've screwed up lots of claims, a lot of claims, and unfortunately, you've had a few of them. It's inevitable. There's no way. There's no two ways about it. You do the best you can, and you try to learn from everything that happens. But yeah, there's definitely more to learn, more information to gather. That's why shows like this are important, I think. I got
curiosity. I think that's probably the highlight word to me of that. That's something that we've always preached in our office, is like, I want everybody on my staff to be curious all the time. There it is.
One of that, adjuster, engineer, lawyer in the middle. So whenever the engineer crosses with one of the other two circles, they are acting outside of their authority in general.
Yep.
Same thing for the adjuster. I guess weather can't really act outside of its authority.
Well, that'd be a meteorologist, right?
Yeah.
Okay, meteorologist. So everything in between, a lawyer would coordinate those efforts, which is weird to think about, actually, a lawyer doing all those things.
We do it on every case.
I didn't realize you guys did that.
We do.
I thought you just sat down and said objection every 5 seconds.
We do that too.
Yeah. Objection to pizza.
They have to understand just enough to be dangerous.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You started doing wind maps about 2 years ago. Is that about right?
Yeah, I think so. Yep.
Is it harder to do wind than hail? Is there a reason other companies don't do wind?
It's so, as much as I coach that our hail maps are not damage maps, they still get perceived that way. And so the idea was that if we start mapping wind, it's also going to be perceived as a damage map. And so like 60 to 70 mile per hour winds, it's not typically, unless it's like a derecho, like what Iowa had, it's not widespread. So meaning, if you have a storm move across the Atlanta metro, let's say it moves across a neighborhood. We'll just use one neighborhood, and the storm was capable of producing 65 mile per hour winds. I cannot show you which houses got the 65-mile-per-hour winds. I have no way of knowing that, but I can promise you that odds are all houses in that neighborhood did not. In fact, I would say probably less than 10% did. But that's just kind of the funky nature of wind, if that makes sense. Like there's a lot of variables that cause it to mix down to the surface. And then the geography, the buildings, the structures, all that stuff causes friction and causes the wind to change directions and move and swirl. And we're not at a point meteorologically that we can pick that stuff up. We cannot fine tune that in. So the idea behind the wind maps was to give people the ability to look at it and go, okay, this storm was capable of producing 60-mile-per-hour winds, and I have wind damage at this property. That's my date of loss. But that's the only reason why we did them. It was not, unless it's like a hurricane or a derecho or a tornado, typically it's not going to lead to widespread wind damage. And so we didn't want contractors to get confused and think that I'm buying this product that's going to show me a swath of roofs that need to be replaced, because it just doesn't work that way. The other thing that's really difficult with wind is that radar picks up wind speed based off of particle movement. But the last time I checked, on a sunny day, it was not raining, and so there were no particles to pick up. But I've seen plenty of sunny days with 60-mile-per-hour winds, especially if you get up into the plains, the mountain, the Front Range. March, it's not uncommon to get 65-mile-an-hour winds behind a cold front on a sunny day. So radar cannot pick that up. And so we can tell you that there was pretty much widespread winds to 60, but it's usually like state size. It's like an entire state was impacted. So, those were the two concerns that we had with wind. It was we put it off for years. The other thing is it was going to be, we had somebody say, well, if you can't tell me if it was widespread wind damage, it's not worth my time. And so, you need to lower your price. And I was like, well, it's not an issue of lowering my price. It cost me, I had to go higher. I had to double my meteorological staff to do that. So it's not like, if it's not worth your time, it's not worth my time, is kind of the way I looked at it, So it turned out it actually was a really good thing. Contractors haven't looked at it the way that I thought that they would. We have had some complaints like this. It wasn't a bunch of widespread wind damage, but once we explain it and they kind of understand it, they're like, oh, I get it. And they have been using it for data loss. And maybe if it is a slower time, I'm going to go in but I know that not every roof I look at is going to be damaged, but here's the area, it hones in the area that I need to go and look for damage. And so, I feel like they've done a really good job of utilizing it the way it is, but that's the long-winded answer to say, yes, it's very hard to do wind.
So wind, I have so many questions. The problem with the wind is you have it at multiple layers of the atmosphere, and you have radar that's able to track particles that are moving at certain speeds within that layer of the atmosphere, but it's going to be based on what angle that radar is able to hit that area. Mm-hmm. Wind is going to be different down on the ground.
Absolutely.
But hail size with the radar, can you track size of hail with radar? Can it bounce back and give you object size inside of a storm?
It can, yes. Well, it's not going to give me like a measurement. So it's not going to say like we measured, 3 2.5-inch objects and a couple of 1-inch ones, but it's going to use, so it does a couple of things. So we use what's called dual pole radar. So it shoots a beam that's this way and a beam that's this way. Mm-hmm. And so that helps me to see shape. And so that shape, so hail, especially larger hail, will tumble. And so it can pick up that tumbling motion. It looks different than a raindrop. A raindrop falls flat. They're not like teardrops like you see. Right. It's not what the guy has a tattoo on his eye there. It's, they're flat like pancakes. So, so the radar can pick up that difference in shape. And so that's how we can actually see larger objects versus smaller objects.
All right. So a larger object takes more energy to move laterally.
Yes.
So if wind is blowing and you're tracking particles in a storm for speed of the wind, and it happens to be a hail event at the same time, and the hail is
Mhm.
large, is it going to track the largest particles in that storm in its movement, or is it tracking moisture movement? I guess.
It's probably a mixture of both. So I mean, you're going to get both. It doesn't typically have trouble picking up. Like if there's high wind, we're going to see it. The biggest problem is I'm picking it up at 1,200 feet up. So now that hail is going to fall down to the ground. But the wind itself, the wind may not come down to the ground, and it's definitely going to come to the ground at a lesser speed. So that's the biggest issue with wind is that so even if we're trying to I see you're like drawing the conclusion of wind driven hail, but the idea that just because I see 65-mile-per-hour winds and big hail doesn't mean that I'm going to get 65-mile-per-hour winds and big hail at the ground. I might just get big hail.
I was curious if the fact that hail exists in that storm is actually going to give you a false reading on the wind speed. If the wind speed is tracked based on the particles in the air, if
We've
the
actually
hail
had
is
the
going at a
reverse
slower
and a
speed than the
bigger.
winds,
Yeah, we've had because there's a lot of small particles up in the cloud too. It's not just the big hail is the only thing that's able to fall to the ground. The small stuff still is moving around up there. So we still get the wind. The bigger thing that we've actually encompassed is that idea of the large objects isn't always hail. It can actually be debris. And so if a storm is really, really windy, sometimes it will put a false positive of large hail up there. And so that's actually we had a storm in Tulsa that taught us the lesson the hard way. We tracked what we said. This was in 2015. We tracked what we thought was softball size hail across the Tulsa metro, but the storm was producing nickel to quarter size hail and 100-mile-per-hour winds. We thought the wind was strong, but we just thought that we call it correlation coefficient is the section of the radar data that tells us large objects. And we thought that it was producing very large hail as well, but it was actually just wind debris that was being lofted up into the storm. And so it was wrong. So, and what it doubled down on us because the storm actually did produce softball size hail 20 minutes before it got to Tulsa, confirmed with photos and everything. It just stopped, but the debris itself got us. So it's kind of interesting. The Newman, Georgia storm, that tornado, it literally outlined the entire storm with debris because it lofted so much debris into the storm.
like
Dang.
cows and shit.
Like 20,000 feet.
Yeah, same cow.
Dang.
Yeah.
Dang.
Let me ask you
That is
another question.
interesting.
If you're in the middle of a tornado, do you think a leather belt is going to keep you from flying up into the center of it?
It's proven if you watch the movie Twister.
I think so.
That is a fact.
Leather
Yep.
is strong.
Proven F5. That's
Mhm.
all it takes.
There you go. Man, that's some interesting information right there, Derik. It really is. And I know if you guys have not bought your ticket and watched the presentations at the American Contractor Summit, you need to. Derik had an hour of going through some things, and I'm not going to spoil it. If you haven't seen it, you need to go check it out and watch the presentation. But that was fantastic. And I had a good time with everybody there. I think all the everybody that was doing the presentation was A+. And John Dye always does it right, no matter what.
Matthew
Absolutely.
Mulholland talk about shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can
You ever
hear
heard of
that
a
too.
shitstorm, Derik?
What's that?
You ever heard of a shitstorm?
I've heard of it before. If
Has it
you've
ever
been to
happened?
Amarillo, Texas, you've smelled it before too.
He'll look at his phone and be like, "Oh my God!"
What if like a tornado went over like a water treatment facility or something along those lines?
Oh,
Would that
God.
be a shitstorm?
Why do you
I would
think
hope I wouldn't be that close.
It'd be amazing, right?
He always
No.
can tie something
Could you
back to
imagine?
this, no matter what.
Could you imagine a water spout at a water treatment facility? What that would look like? That would be horrible.
Oof.
Horrendous.
You have to start wearing one of those stickers that says, "Hello, my name is I talk about shit constantly."
I'm a shit talker.
I love it. I love it. It was good. It was good, Matt.
Thank
It was
you.
good.
Thank you.
Yeah, man.
This guy likes us. Hang on. Yeah, Derik Kline is a man. Shout out to the amazing PA in the game, Matthew Mulholland.
Decline. That's his
Bullshit.
DJ storm.
Did you
That was
see that
hilarious.
news article?
Yeah,
Derek, did
that
you
was
happen
great.
to see that news article?
I think I did. Yeah, you posted something about it. I remember seeing that. That was crazy.
That's a real thing.
Yeah.
That was real. That actually happened. There, and for the viewers out there, there was a bull semen explosion. I don't even know where it was. I didn't get that far in the article. I kind of stopped there and couldn't
needed.
see straight.
Oh my God.
That was funny.
That was funny.
That was a real thing. Somewhere there is a facility filled with vats, well, not anymore, of bull semen, and it exploded. Why do they keep vats of it?
You're gonna
So
have
they
to
can
ask
keep
them that.
having-
Is this for Armageddon? I mean, is that an important thing to have during Armageddon? I mean, know those seed vaults.
I feel like it is.
Well, it got screwed up because of the storm that hit. So, or no, the explosion.
Yeah, the explosion. We don't know what started it. Could have been an act of war. Who knows?
Oh my God.
Absolutely.
Cows are mad.
Derik, thank you so much for your time and all the information that you provided. It's awesome. Guys, if you don't have HailTrace, get it. I'm telling you, if you're in this industry, it's significant to what you do. So make sure you get it.
Yeah.
Seriously.
For legitimacy's sake, we should tell you that HailTrace has decided to be a sponsor of the show, which is fantastic. We appreciate that. I haven't gotten your money yet because I haven't set up that account yet. But once I do, you're going to have the first logo behind us. It's going to be great. But I've been using HailTrace for 4.5 to 5 years, and it just keeps getting better. And I really, it's fantastic. When we put it through our system, just to give you guys an idea of how we use it at my company. When we have a claim where there wasn't quite enough damage, or if we have a claim where the policy wasn't good enough, didn't have enough coverage, we would put it into a status we called closed follow-up. And we would tell the contractor, go out and make repairs. And we put in closed follow-up, and I would upload my contacts into HailTrace that had the status closed follow-up. And every time a storm came through, I would be able to produce a list from that storm of all of my contacts that were inside of that storm. And we would call those people and go back out and inspect. And we know that they had, they've updated coverages, or they might have severe enough damage at that point that a claim might be worthwhile. Obviously, they need to have new damages, not the same damages, but it's worked out tremendously. And we were able probably over the years to recapture 20 to 25% of our claims that we turned down. I can't tell you how much money we were able to make. The return on investment from HailTrace was enormous. It's a worthwhile investment. Absolutely worthwhile. So,
And with that, we're announcing a 20% increase in cost this year.
There you go, Matt.
I mean, you probably should. But you know, whatever. You got to pay for me. So
That's right.
There you go.
Derik, I appreciate it.
Thank you guys. It was fun being on here.
Yeah, bud. Thank you.
Always look forward to these talks. So I'm going to kick you off for a minute. If you want to hang out in the wings, we can chat a little bit afterwards if you want to. If you got to go, no big deal. Either way.
We'll see you, bud.
Guys, I love having Derik on the show. I want him on again.
He's awesome.
I have
He's great.
20 more
You have
questions.
such a fanboy crush. Total
It's so
fanboy.
interesting.
I got to meet him in person at was it the Wind Conference, Win the Storm, as well as the American Contractor Summit and everything else. And great guy, awesome guy, and his product is fabulous as well. So
it's really cool. And he's always improving the thing, which is great. So I don't have the information in front of me. Next week on Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern will be our next live session. It's entirely possible I'm in Texas again. I'm attempting to get an engineer on I've got a few possibilities that are coming from the carrier side that will probably end up telling me that they're not allowed to. But in that case, we're going to get the APEC engineering guys, and we'll know very soon. But APEC has agreed to be on there. And if you guys haven't met them, they're the guys that were at the Win the Storm, and they shot my shit frisbee. We shot the shit together. They took a hail cannon and they literally shot my fake turd, which was made of spray foam. And now we're putting together a video about the loss of R value with spray foam applications. And we're using that video for it. So once that comes out, it'll be publicized. It'll be great. But APEC Engineering is probably who we're going to have on. However, and I'm sure they understand, if we do end up getting the other guys from the carrier side, the engineers that get hired by the carrier, I think that most of us would have some better questions for those engineers. Highly doubtful they're going to be able to be on, though. Most of them have had to say no to us many times. We keep trying.
Yeah. You got to shoot the score.
Yeah. That's why we asked Elon to be on, too. He won't even respond.
I think we should do a show at the Apex actual facility one day.
Well, we're definitely doing that. They have invited us out there, which is why I don't think it'll matter that much if we end up getting somebody else. APEC engineering guys have invited us out there, but they're moving. They're moving their facility. So once they have the new facility up, we get to go take a tour. And we get to check out their cannons. They're going to let me push the button. Which,
let you
makes
push
me
the
happy.
button.
I'm happy about it. So anyway, don't miss the next episode, Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern. If you have any questions for Derik Kline, you can post them in the comments even after the show. I'm sure he'd be happy to answer those questions. If you have any questions for us, we'd be happy to answer those as well. And tell all your friends and neighbors about the show because we need more subscribers. And if you aren't subscribed to us on YouTube, we are attempting to get 1,000 subscribers as quickly as possible on YouTube. Please go and subscribe specifically on YouTube if you can. We would really appreciate that. Anything from you?
Nope, that's it. Thank you guys.
Cool.
Appreciate it.
I'll see you guys
See you
next
later.
time.